Susan stepped forward as the massive doors to the alien throne room slid open with a soft hiss. The guards of the Zaxian Empire towered over her human frame, their purple skin gleaming under the strange blue lights. Susan kept her face neutral, despite her racing heart. The Zaxian Queen Vexara sat upon her crystalline throne. Her 6 eyes narrowed as she studied the small human female approaching. Her long silver hair floated around her head, as if suspended in water. A sign of her psychic abilities. "A human guard dares to request audience with me," Queen Vexara said. Her voice echoed through the chamber like distant thunder. "How amusing." Susan bowed respectfully, keeping her eyes lowered as was custom. She had studied Zaxian protocols for months, preparing for this moment. "Your Majesty, I bring information vital to the security of your empire." The Queen laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "What could a simple guard know that my intelligence network does not?" The alien guards shifted nervously. Their species had only encountered humans 5 years ago, when Earthships first entered Zaxian space. Relations had been tense from the start. "The rebel faction within your military plans to strike during the Festival of Moons," Susan said, still bowing. "They have acquired phase bombs capable of destroying your palace shields." Queen Vexara leaned forward, her 6 eyes blinking in sequence. "And how would you know this human?" Susan finally looked up, meeting the Queen's gaze. "Because I was the one who sold them the bombs." A collective gasp rippled through the throne room. The Queen's guards moved to seize Susan, but Vexara raised one 6-fingered hand, stopping them. "Explain yourself before I have you executed," the Queen demanded. Susan straightened, her posture changing before their eyes. She no longer looked like a nervous guard, but someone with authority and purpose. "I work for Earth Intelligence. My team infiltrated the rebel group 3 months ago. We needed to identify all conspirators before they could strike." "A spy," Vexara hissed, her hair moving more rapidly, showing her agitation. "An ally," Susan corrected. "The bombs I sold them are non-functional. The activation codes were falsified. Earth has no interest in your empire falling. We prefer stable trading partners." Queen Vexara stood towering 12 feet tall, her ceremonial robes shimmering with embedded technology. "Why would Earth protect me? The treaty between our worlds barely maintains peace." Susan smiled. "Because the alternative to you, Your Majesty, is much worse. The rebels plan to harvest Earth for resources once you're gone. Their leader, General Kizoth, has already drawn up invasion plans." "Kizoth," Vexara whispered. Her middle eyes widened in shock. "My own cousin," Susan nodded. "I have proof." She touched her wrist device, projecting holographic documents into the air. Between them floated battle plans, communication logs, and weapons schematics. For several minutes, Queen Vexara studied the evidence, her expression unreadable to most, but Susan had been trained to read Zaxian facial cues. The Queen was both furious and afraid. "If what you show me is true human, then your people have done my empire a great service," Vexara finally said. "Call me Susan. And yes, everything is true. The rebels will strike in 3 days. We need to act quickly." The Queen descended from her throne, approaching Susan. Her guards tensed but remained in position. "You risked your life coming here directly. Why not pass this through diplomatic channels?" "Because your diplomatic corps has been compromised," Susan said. "We couldn't be certain who to trust." Queen Vexara circled Susan, studying her from all angles. "You're more than a simple intelligence agent, aren't you? I sense something different about you." Susan hesitated, then nodded. "I'm a Psi-Corps operative, one of 50 humans born with psychic abilities after the Centauri incident." Now the Queen froze. Her 6 eyes locked on Susan. "Impossible. Humans have no psychic potential. Our scientists confirmed this." Susan smiled and raised her hand. A small blue flame appeared, dancing above her palm. "Your scientists were wrong. Or perhaps we evolved faster than expected." The throne room erupted in chaos. Guards drew weapons, advisors shouted. The Queen silenced them with a mental blast that made the crystal walls vibrate. "If you possessed such power, why reveal it now?" Queen Vixara asked, her voice quieter, more dangerous. Because the rebel leader is also psychic. Susan explained, extinguishing the flame. And he plans to use that power to control the minds of your military commanders. You need someone who can counter his abilities. Vixara laughed, but there was no humor in it. So Earth sends one operative against an experienced Zaxian psychic, and I should trust you. Susan stepped closer, ignoring the nervous guards. Your Majesty, I could have hidden my abilities. I could have let the rebels succeed. Earth might have benefited from negotiating with new leadership. But instead, I'm here. Why? Vixara demanded. Because humans and Zaxians are more alike than different. We both value honor, loyalty, family. My mission is to ensure peace not just for Earth, but for both our peoples. The Queen was silent for a long moment. Her floating hair slowly settled around her shoulders, a sign she was reaching a decision. You will remain here under guard while I verify your claims. She finally said, if you speak truth, you will have the gratitude of the Empire. If you lie, no power psychic, or otherwise will save you. Susan bowed again. Understood, Your Majesty. After Susan was escorted out, Queen Vixara returned to her throne. Her chief advisor approached cautiously. My queen, can we trust this human? He asked. Vixara stared at the doors through which Susan had disappeared. Trust, no. But we can use her summon. General Kaizoth, I wish to speak with my cousin. 2 days later, Susan found herself aboard the Queen's personal shuttle, racing toward the remote moon base where, according to their intelligence, General Kaizoth was gathering his forces. You were right, Queen Vixara said as they approached. My cousin has been stealing military resources for months, preparations for a coup. Susan nodded, checking her equipment. And the phase bombs, deactivated as you claimed. The Queen studied Susan. Your Earth. Leaders must value you highly to risk you in such an operation. Susan smiled tightly. Or perhaps they considered me expendable. No, Vixara said with surprising certainty. I have studied your kind. Humans never waste valuable resources, and a psychic operative is very valuable indeed. The shuttle landed silently using stealth technology Susan had never seen before. Queen Vixara herself led a team of 6 elite guards plus Susan through the airlock. Remember? Susan whispered. General Kaizoth can. Red surface thoughts. Shield your minds as I showed you. The base appeared mostly deserted. They encountered only 2 guards who were quickly subdued. When they reached the central chamber, they found General Kaizoth surrounded by holographic displays. Cousin, he said without turning, your thoughts betray you as always. Queen Vixara stepped forward. Surrender, Kaizoth. Your conspiracy is exposed. The general turned. His resemblance to the Queen was striking, except his eyes were red instead of gold, and you brought a human to help you. How desperate you must be. Susan felt his mind brush against hers, probing, searching. She blocked him, using techniques perfected through years of training. Kaizoth frowned. Interesting. The human has defenses. The human has a name, Susan said, stepping forward, and much more than defenses. What followed was unlike anything the Zaxians had witnessed, a battle not of weapons but of minds. Susan and General Kaizoth locked in psychic combat, waves of energy visibly distorting the air between them. The Queen and her guards could only watch as Susan fought, sweat beaded on her forehead, her body trembling with effort. Kaizoth similarly strained, his red eyes glowing brighter. Impossible, he gasped. No human could have this power. Susan pushed harder, forcing Kaizoth to his knees. You underestimated us. That was your first mistake. With a final surge of mental energy, Susan broke through his defenses. The general collapsed, unconscious. Queen Vixara approached cautiously. Is he alive? Susan confirmed, breathing heavily. But his psychic abilities are burned out permanently. The Queen studied Susan with new respect. You never mentioned you could do that. Susan straightened her uniform. There are many things about humans you don't know. Yet. Later, as they returned to the palace, Queen Vixara sat across from Susan in the shuttle. My empire owes you a debt, Psychor operative. Susan nodded tiredly. Perhaps this can be the beginning of a true alliance between our peoples, not just tense coexistence. Perhaps. The Queen agreed. Though I wonder what other secrets your kind keeps, Susan smiled. No more than your people, I imagine. Queen Vexara laughed, a genuine sound this time. You are not what you appear. To be Susan of Earth, I thought you just a guard when you first entered my throne room. Sometimes, Susan replied, the most important people are the ones you least expect. The shuttle docked at the royal palace. As they disembarked, Queen Vexara made an unprecedented gesture, placing her six-fingered hand on Susan's shoulder. The Festival of Moons begins tomorrow. You will attend as my honored guest, she declared. Let our people see a human standing beside the Zaxian queen. Perhaps then they will understand what I now do. And what is that, your majesty? Susan asked. Queen Vexara looked down at the human, her six eyes gleaming. That the universe is larger than we imagined, and that sometimes the most powerful allies come in unexpected forms, Susan smiled, thinking of the message she would send to Earth headquarters. The mission had succeeded beyond all expectations. Not only had they prevented a coup, but they had gained the trust of the Zaxian queen herself. Sometimes being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all. 6 months passed since the failed coup. The alliance between Earth and the Zaxian Empire grew stronger. Susan remained on Zaxia as the first human ambassador. She had proven her worth beyond all doubt. The grand hall of the palace buzzed with activity. Zaxian nobles mingled with human diplomats. Their height difference made the gathering look almost comical. Tall purple aliens towering over the smaller pink humans. But the atmosphere was warm, respectful. Susan stood near a window watching the three moons rise. Her formal Earth uniform had been modified with Zaxian symbols of honor, a rare privilege for any outsider. Ambassador Susan. A soft voice called. She turned to see Lyra, a young human woman recently arrived from Earth. Susan smiled warmly. Lyra, how are you settling in? Still adjusting to the gravity, Lyra admitted, and the food, but everyone has been kind. Susan nodded. Queen Vexara has made it clear that humans are to be treated with respect. Is it true what they say? Lyra asked, lowering her voice. That you're the reason for this alliance, that you have powers. Susan glanced around, making sure no one was listening. Partially true. The alliance was inevitable once we understood each other better. As for powers, let's just say, I have certain abilities that proved useful. Before Lyra could ask more questions, a tall Zaxian approached them. His uniform marked him as military high command. Ambassador, the Queen requests your presence immediately. Susan frowned. This was unusual. During a diplomatic function, of course, General Taxor. In the Queen's private chambers, Susan found Vexara studying a holographic star map. Her expression was grim, her silver hair moving erratically. Your Majesty. Susan bowed. What's happened? The Drakari. Vexara said, not looking up. They have crossed the neutral zone. 3 colony worlds gone silent. Susan felt cold. The Drakari were an ancient race feared throughout this sector of the galaxy. Even the Zaxians, with their advanced technology, avoided conflict with them. How? Susan asked. The peace treaty has held for centuries. They claim humans violated their space. Vexara turned all 6 eyes, focusing on Susan. They demand we hand over all humans in our territory or face extermination. Susan shook her head. That's impossible. Earth ships would never enter Drakari space. It's too far from our established routes. I know, Vexara agreed. This is a pretext. The Drakari have been watching our alliance with suspicion. They fear what humans and Zaxians might accomplish together. Susan studied the star map. 3 Zaxian colonies closest to Drakari space had gone dark. Nearly 60,000 Zaxian lives potentially lost. How many ships? She asked. Their main fleet. 30 warships according to our scouts, Vexara replied. More than enough to reach Earth if they choose. Susan paced, thinking quickly. Your fleet, being mobilized, but it will take time. Vexara said. The Drakari know our defenses were weakened by Kaizoth's rebellion. We still have traitors feeding them information. Susan stopped, her eyes widening. Your Majesty, what if we could turn this threat into an opportunity? Vexara tilted her head. Explain. The Drakari think they know our capabilities. Susan said, her mind racing. They expect your ships, your weapons, but they know nothing about human psychic abilities. You suggest using your powers against an entire fleet? Vexara sounded skeptical. Even you are not that strong, Susan. Susan smiled. Not alone, no, but I haven't. Been entirely honest with you, Your Majesty. I am not one of 50 Psi-Corps operatives, I am one of 500. The Queen stared at her. You lied. I withheld information. Until I was certain of your trust. Susan said calmly. Earth has been developing psychic abilities since the Centauri incident. 20 years of secret training. Our powers grow stronger with each generation. Vexara stood, her tall frame looming over Susan. And you suggest bringing these psychics to my world to fight our war. Fight our war. Susan corrected. If the Drakari destroy the Zaxian Empire, Earth will be next. We share this threat. The question is, do you trust humans enough to accept our help? The Queen was silent for a long moment. Her hair settled, a sign she had made her decision. How many psychics would you need? 50, Susan said. The strongest we have, including Lyra, who just arrived. She specializes in ship systems disruption. The young one, Vexara, seemed surprised. She looks so harmless, Susan. Smiled. Appearances can be deceiving, Your Majesty, as you learned when I first entered your throne room. For the first time since Susan had known her, Queen Vexara looked uncertain. If I agree to this, my council will demand assurances. These psychics, what prevents them from turning against us later? The same thing that prevents your fleet from attacking Earth. Susan replied, mutual survival. The Drakari would consume us both. We need each other. The Queen nodded slowly. Make your arrangements. Ambassador, I will inform the Council. This alliance will face its first true test. 3 days later, Susan stood in a large chamber deep beneath the palace. Around her, 49 human psychics sat in meditation circles, their eyes closed, faces serene, despite the gravity of their mission. Lyra, the youngest, approached Susan. The Drakari fleet has entered the Kazim system. They will reach the homeworld in 6 hours. Susan nodded. Are you nervous? Lyra smiled. Terrified but ready. The simulation training worked well. We can coordinate our abilities across greater distances than ever before. Good. Susan looked around at her fellow psychics, men and women of varying ages, all with extraordinary gifts. Remember, we are guests here. The Zaxians are watching. We need to show them humans can be trusted with power. A door opened and Queen Vexara entered, accompanied by her war council. The tall aliens regarded the humans with a mixture of hope and suspicion. The fleet is in position, Vexara announced. Our ships will engage the Drakari at the edge of our system, but they outnumber us. Susan bowed. We understand, Your Majesty. We are ready to begin. The Queen hesitated, then said, if you succeed today, the alliance between our peoples will be unbreakable. If you fail, we won't, Susan said with quiet confidence. The Drakari are about to learn that appearances can be deceiving. In the command center beneath the palace, Susan watched as holographic displays showed the approaching Drakari fleet. Massive black ships shaped like arrowheads sliced through space. Their hulls absorbed light rather than reflected it, making them seem like moving shadows. Terrifying, aren't they? General Taxer commented, standing beside Susan. The ships are partially organic, grown rather than built. Susan studied the enemy vessels, biological components that could work in our favor, on the main screen. The Zaxian defense fleet moved into formation. Their ships were smaller but more numerous, gleaming silver against the darkness of space. Queen Vixara entered the command center, her royal guards flanking her. The Drakari commander demands our surrender. Their terms remain unchanged. All humans to be handed over immediately. Have they shown themselves? Susan asked. Most spacefaring races communicated visually during confrontations. No. Vexara replied. The Drakari consider themselves too superior to show their forms to lesser beings. They communicate through audio channels only. Susan exchanged glances with Lyra, who stood nearby monitoring communications. Perfect. The psychic team had prepared for this moment for 3 days. They had trained merging their abilities in ways never before attempted. Susan turned to the Queen. With your permission, Your Majesty would like to begin our operation. Vexara nodded. Proceed. Ambassador. Susan led Lyra and 5 other psychics to a separate chamber adjacent to the command center but isolated. The walls were lined with dampening technology to prevent psychic energy from affecting the palace systems. The 7 humans sat in a circle on the floor. They joined hands, Lyra being the youngest but one of the strongest took the lead position. Remember? Susan said quietly. We are not attacking their minds directly. That would be detected. Instead, we focus on their ships, sensory systems, communications, navigation, life support, subtle changes. Nothing dramatic. Lyra closed her eyes. I have the communications array on their lead vessel, initiating contact now. The psychics fell silent, their eyes closed, breathing synchronized, as one their consciousness reached out across the void of space touching the Drakari fleet. In the command center, Queen Vixara watched anxiously. The Drakari ships had stopped advancing, their formation holding position just beyond weapons range. What's happening? She demanded. General Taxer studied. His instruments. Unknown, Your Majesty. The Drakari fleet has ceased all movement. Their communications have gone silent. Minutes passed. The tension in the command center grew. No one understood what was happening. The Drakari ships remained motionless, in space. Neither advancing nor retreating. Suddenly, one of the Drakari vessels fired on another. The black arrowhead ship erupted in green energy, tearing through the organic hull of its neighbor. They're attacking each other, General Taxer exclaimed. More. Drakari ships opened fire on one another, their perfect formation dissolving into chaos. Some vessels attempted to flee, others pursued firing relentlessly. Queen. Vexara turned to her communication officer. What are we receiving from them? Nothing. Coherent. Your Majesty. The officer replied. Fragments only. They appear to be seeing different things. Their sensors are giving conflicting readings. In the psychic chamber, Susan opened her eyes momentarily. Phase 1, complete. Moving to Phase 2. Lyra nodded, her face strained with concentration. Accessing navigation systems, now introducing subtle errors. Back in the command center, the Zaxians watched in astonishment as the Drakari fleet began to move erratically. Some ships accelerated dangerously. Others spun in place as if their stabilizers had failed. 3 vessels collided, their hulls rupturing in silent explosions. By the ancestors, Vexara whispered. What are they doing to them? After 20 minutes of chaos, the remaining Drakari ships began a disorganized retreat, their once mighty fleet reduced to scattered vessels fleeing in different directions. In the psychic chamber, the humans finally released hands, their faces pale with exhaustion. Lyra nearly collapsed, Susan catching her before she hit the floor. It's done, Susan said, her voice hoarse. The Drakari believe they encountered some kind of space anomaly that affected their systems. They blame each other for the failure. The fleet is scattered. When they returned to the SEW command center, the Zaxians stared at them with a mixture of awe and fear. General Taxor bowed deeply to Susan, something he had never done before. Queen Vexara approached Susan, her 6 eyes studying the human with new understanding. You turned them against each other without firing a single shot. Susan nodded. We created confusion, Not direct control. That's too difficult at this distance. We simply made their instruments show different readings. Each ship thought the others had been compromised. Their paranoia did the rest, and they never knew. Vexara said, they never knew it was humans. That was essential, Susan explained. If the Drakari learned about human psychic abilities, they would develop defenses. We needed to keep our advantage. Secret. The Queen turned to address her war council. What we witnessed today changes everything. The human psychics have proven their worth beyond question. General Taxer stepped forward. Your Majesty, with respect, we must consider the implications. If humans can do this to Drakari ships, what could they do to ours? A tense silence fell over the command center. Susan felt the mood shift from gratitude to suspicion. She had expected this, a fair concern, General, she said calmly. The same one I raised when I first revealed my abilities to Queen Vexara. Any power can be used or misused. The question is not what we could do, but what we choose to do. Susan turned to address the entire council. Today, 50 humans used their abilities to save billions of Zaxian lives. We did so because we believe our futures are linked. Earth needs the Zaxian Empire as an ally. The Drakari are not the only threat in this galaxy. There will be others. Queen Vexara moved to stand beside Susan, a symbolic gesture not lost on anyone present. What Ambassador Susan says is true. We must judge our allies by their actions. The humans could have used these abilities against us at any time. Instead, they shared their secret, saved our worlds. She placed her six-fingered hand on Susan's shoulder. No longer will humans serve as guards or mere diplomats in our empire. From this day forward, they will stand as equals, partners in our mutual defense. Susan bowed deeply. Your Majesty honors us. Later in the Queen's private chambers, Susan, Lyra, and Vexara met alone. The 3 moons of Zaxia visible through the crystal windows. The Drakari will return, Vexara said, once they recover from their confusion. Yes, Susan agreed. But by then the formal alliance between our worlds will be established. Both our fleets will be ready, and they will never know what really happened today. Lyra, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. They underestimated us because we're small, because we're new to space. They saw humans as weak. Queen Vexara laughed. As did I when Susan first entered my throne room. I thought she was just a guard. 1 year later, the grand ceremonial hall of the Zaxian palace glittered with light from 1,000 crystal lamps. Representatives from 12 spacefaring races gathered to witness history in the making. Susan stood on the raised platform beside Queen Vexara. Her diplomatic uniform now included elements of Zaxian royal design, a symbol of her unique position. Behind her stood 50 human psychics, including Lyra, now her official second-in-command. Never thought we'd end up here, Lyra whispered. From infiltrating rebel groups to standing in a royal hall, Susan smiled. Long way from Earth. The massive doors opened as the Drakari delegation entered. The crowd parted nervously. Even now, few races dared to stand near the feared conquerors, the Drakari. Moved with fluid grace, their bodies covered in iridescent scales that shifted colors with each movement. Their eyes, large and golden, had vertical pupils like a cat's. Susan had learned they could see into spectrums invisible to most species. The lead Drakari ambassador approached the platform, bowing stiffly to Queen Vexara. We come as agreed to sign the Treaty of 3 Sectors. Susan studied the alien carefully. This was only the second time she'd seen a Drakari in person. The first time had been during the initial negotiations following their fleet's mysterious failure. She sensed the creature's reluctance mixed with fear. The Drakari Empire, unused to defeat, had accepted this treaty only after months of careful diplomacy. Queen Vexara stepped forward, her tall frame imposing even to the Drakari. We welcome you, Ambassador Exrel. The treaty benefits all our peoples, establishing clear boundaries and protocols for future contact. The Drakari ambassador glanced at Susan, his golden eyes narrowing. The human presence at these proceedings remains problematic. Their kind are newcomers to space. They lack understanding of galactic history. Susan stepped forward. With respect, Ambassador Xrel, it is precisely because we are newcomers that our perspective has value. We bring fresh eyes to old conflicts. The Drakari made a hissing sound that might have been laughter. Fresh eyes indeed. Though I wonder what else humans bring to this alliance. Susan maintained her composure, knowing the Drakari suspected something but had no proof of the psychic interference, only our commitment to peace, Ambassador. The treaty signing proceeded with elaborate ceremony, each representative placing their mark on the ancient parchment, a tradition maintained across the galaxy despite advanced technology. Some customs transcended species. When the formalities concluded, Queen Vexera hosted a reception in the palace gardens. The artificial environment maintained perfect conditions for plants. From all 12 worlds, Susan found herself standing near a earth rosebush, its red bloom startling against the purple and blue Zaxian vegetation. A word, Ambassador Susan. A voice hissed behind her. She turned to find Xrel, the Drakari ambassador. His scales had shifted to a deep blue, almost black. Of course, Ambassador, Susan replied, keeping her mind carefully shielded. The Drakari were not known to be psychic, but caution had become her nature. My government accepts this treaty, Xrel said, his voice low. But I remain curious about what happened to our fleet. What really happened? Susan maintained her diplomatic smile. Space is full of mysteries, Ambassador, anomalies, energy fields, natural phenomena beyond our current understanding. The Drakari moved closer, his scent like cinnamon and copper. There was nothing natural about what occurred. Our ships experienced identical malfunctions at precisely the same moment. Such coincidences do not exist. Perhaps your technology encountered something it wasn't designed to handle, Susan suggested. The universe rarely conforms to our expectations. Xrel studied her, his vertical pupils expanding. You were there that day aboard the Zaxian command station. Your arrival on Zaxia coincides with many changes in this sector. The Zaxian Queen's new policies, the rapid advancement of Earth, the formation of this alliance. Susan met his gaze steadily. Change is inevitable, Ambassador, even for empires as ancient as yours, perhaps especially for them. The Drakari ambassador was silent for a moment. Then he said, There is a saying among my people, small creatures move quickest beneath the shadow of giants. Remember that, Ambassador Susan, when you stand in our shadow. And remember, Ambassador, Xrel. Susan replied calmly, Sometimes the smallest creatures are the most dangerous. Later that evening, after the delegates had departed, Susan stood with Queen Vexera on the palace balcony. The 3 moons of Zaxia reflected in the crystal sea, below the Drakari suspect. Vexera said, But they cannot prove anything. Susan nodded. They will be watching us more closely now, especially humans. Are you concerned? The Queen asked. Cautious. Susan replied, but not worried. The treaty gives us time. Earth and Zaxia both need to prepare, strengthen our position. Queen Vexera turned to face Susan. When you first came to my throne room pretending to be a simple guard, did you imagine this outcome? Susan laughed. Not exactly. The mission parameters were much simpler. Stop the coup. Secure an alliance, avoid getting executed. And now you stand as ambassador between 2 empires. A human with powers few can imagine. Vexera said, Your people trust you with much responsibility. As do yours. Susan pointed out. The Queen was silent for a moment. Then she said, The Galactic Council has requested Earth join as a probationary member. They were impressed by the treaty. Susan raised her eyebrows. That is unexpected. Earth is still considered primitive by most standards. Perhaps, Vexera agreed. Or perhaps they wish to keep humans where they can see them. The older races fear what they do not understand. And what about you, Your Majesty? Susan asked. Do you fear what humans might become? The Queen considered the question. I respect what you already are, that is enough. In her quarters later that night, Susan composed her report to Earth Command. The treaty was signed, the alliance secure. Earth would now have access to Zaxian technology, including faster-than-light communications and advanced shield systems. In return, the Zaxians gained human psychics to help protect their colonies. Lyra entered without knocking, their formality long abandoned. The Drakari ships have left orbit, heading back to their territory. Susan nodded. Good, but they will be watching. Make sure our people understand discretion is still essential. No public displays of ability. Lyra sat across from Susan. Do you really think this will work? The alliance, the treaty, everything we're building. Susan looked out at the alien sky, so different from Earth's, yet somehow beginning to feel like home. It has to work. The galaxy is changing. Humans need allies. The Zaxians need us, whether they fully realize it yet or not. And the Drakari, Lyra asked, will adapt or be left behind. Susan said, like all empires, they fear change, but change comes regardless. She remembered her first day in the throne room, how the Queen had dismissed her, how everyone had underestimated what humans could do. Susan smiled at the memory. Sometimes, she said to Lyra, the most powerful advantage is being underestimated. Lyra nodded, understanding. You were never just a guard, were you? Susan looked back at the stars, thinking of Earth and the future that awaited them all. None of us are ever just what we appear to be. The universe is far too interesting for that. On the distant Drakari flagship, Ambassador XREL reviewed the sensor logs from the incident one more time. The reading still made no sense. Still showed impossible failures. His scientists had found no technological explanation. For the first time in his long life, Grell felt something unfamiliar. Fear. Not of the Zaxians. Their technology was known, but of the small pink creatures, who called themselves humans. What else might they be hiding behind their unassuming appearance? What powers might they develop given time and opportunity? He closed the file, making his decision. The humans would need to be watched, very closely indeed. The Game of Empires had a new player one that no one had anticipated, and XREL suspected the galaxy would never be the same.